Hello friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Paromita Chattaraj from the School of Law, KIT University. Today we will be discussing the module, The Structure of Criminal Justice System. The learning objectives are to make the learners understand the structure of the police in India, to acquaint the learners with the structure of the courts, to make the learners understand the structure of the prison. To introduce the module, basically the criminal justice system of any state is the set of agencies and processes established by the governments for the administration of criminal justice aimed at controlling crime and imposing punishment on the person who violate the law. The Union of India is a federal state and currently consisting of central government and the state governments in the 29 states. The states have their own powers and functioning under the Constitution of India. The police, the prisons are the state subjects. However, the federal laws are followed by the police, judiciary and correctional institutes, which form the basic organs of the criminal justice system. The system followed in India for dispensation of criminal justice is the adversarial system of common law inherited from the British colonial rulers. In the Indian criminal justice administration, the police investigate while the judge's role is like a neutral umpire and a fact finder, and he also imposes the sentence. The execution of the sentence is bestowed on the correctional institutes. Now, basically the structure of the criminal justice system consists of four main pillars, namely investigation by the police, prosecution of case by the prosecutors, determination of guilt by the courts, and finally correction through the prison system. Article 246 of the Constitution of India places the police, public order, courts, prison, reformatories, brothels and other allied institutes in the state list. Now coming to investigation by the police. The very crux of the criminal trial is laid down by the investigation by the police. The information of the offence is registered in the local police station under section 154 of the Code of Criminal Procedure Code 1973, which will be known as CRPC. Thereafter, the police starts the investigation under section 156 CRPC. Section 161 empowers the investigating officer to examine the person supposed to be acquainted with the facts and circumstances of the case and record the statement in writing. However, section 162 of the code provides that it is only the accused that can make use of such a statement. So far as the prosecution is concerned, the statement can be used only to contradict the maker of the statement in accordance with section 145 of the Indian Evidence Act. Any confession made by the accused before the police officer is not admissible and cannot be used during the trial of the case. The statement of the accused recorded by the police can be provided under section 27 of the Indian Evidence Act to the limited extent that lead to the discovery of the fact. The police can arrest a person for commission of cognizable offence under section 41 of the CRPC in accordance to the procedure given under section 46 of the CRPC. In the course of investigation, the police officer may search any premise under section 165 and 166 where there is an expectation to find any document or material in connection with a cognizable offence. Any such items may be seized by the police under section 102 of the CRPC. Police has the discretion to discharge a person arrested on executing a bond under section 169 CRPC in case the officer feels that there is not enough incriminating material against such persons. Finally, all such statements of the witnesses and the evidence collected through the investigation along with the copy of the first information report is made into a police report and submitted under section 173 to the magistrate for taking cognizance thereupon. Apart from this, the police also conducts the inquest where an information of death is received under section 174 of the Criminal Procedure Code. The police is a state subject and its organization and working are governed by rules and regulations framed by the state governments. These rules and regulations are outlined in the police manuals of the state police forces. Each state or union territory has its separate police force. Despite the diversity of police forces, there is a good deal that is common amongst them. This is due to four main reasons. First, the structure and working of the state police forces are governed by the Police Act of 1861, which is applicable in most parts of the country, or by the state police acts modelled mostly on the 1861 legislation. Second, the Indian Police Services or IPS is an all India service which is recruited, trained and managed by the central government, which provides the bulk of senior officers to the state police forces. The quasi-federal character of the Indian polity with specific provisions in the constitution allows a coordinating and counselling role for the centre in the police matters and even authorizes it to set up certain central police organization, which is the third important point. Superintendence over the police force in the state is exercised by the state government. The head of the police force in the state is the Director General of Police or the DGP, who is responsible to the state government for administration of police force in the state and for advising the government on police matters. Field establishment states are divided territorially into administrative units known as districts. An officer of the rank of Superintendent of Police heads the district police force. A group of districts form a range which is looked after by an officer of the rank of Deputy Inspector General of Police. Some states have zones comprising 2 or more ranges under the charge of an officer of the rank of Inspector General of Police. Every district is divided into subdivisions. A subdivision is under the charge of officer of rank of ASP and Deputy SP. Every subdivision is further divided into a number of police stations depending on its area, population and volume of crime. Between the police station and the subdivision, there are police circles in some states, each circle headed generally by an inspector of police. The police station is the basic unit of the police administration in a district. Under the Criminal Procedure Code, all crimes to be recorded at the police station and all preventive investigation, law and order work is done from there. A police station is divided in a number of beats which are assigned to constables for patrolling, surveillance and collection of intelligence, etc. The officer in charge of a police station is the Inspector of Police, particularly in cities and metropolitan areas. Even in other places, the bigger police stations in terms of area, population, crime or order, law and order problems are placed under the charge of Inspector of Police. In rural areas of smaller police stations, the officer in charge is usually a sub-inspector of police. Commissionerate of system of policing should be discussed in a way that the commissionerate system of policing was introduced in certain metropolitan areas like Calcutta, Bombay, Madras and Hyderabad. Under this system, the responsibility for policing the city or area is vested in the Commissioner of Police. While the commissionerate system initially existed in 4 cities in the last century, it has been extended to many areas since the independence. Let us now discuss about the Criminal Investigation Department, or which is commonly known as the CID. The Criminal Investigation Departments or CIDs, as they are known, are specialized branches of the police force. They have 2 main components, the crime branch and the special branch. The police officer in charge of the CID generally supervises the work of both the branches. Though some states appoint a separate officer in charge of the special branch, the crime branch is the most important investigation agency of the state police. It investigates certain specialized crimes like counterfeiting of currency, professional cheating, activities of criminal gangs, crimes with interdistrict or interstate ramification, etc. In fact, when certain major crimes remain unsolved or when the public demands investigation by any agency other than the local police, the government or the head of the police force transfer the case for investigation from the district police to the CID. The special branch, on the other hand, collects, collates and disseminates intelligence from the security point of view. Its main role is to keep a watch over and the supervises the activities of persons, parties and organizations and keep all concerned informed. Let us now discuss about the Central Bureau of Investigation, and which is also nowadays known as the CBI. CBI was originally set up as the Special Police Establishment in 1941 to investigate cases of bribery and corruption involving the employees of the War and Supply Department of the Government of India during the Second World War. Even after the war was over, the need to continue the agency to investigate corruption charges involving government servants was felt. The Delhi Police Establishment Act was passed in 1946 to give the organization a statutory base. Its jurisdiction was extended to cover the cases of corruption involving employees of all departments of the Government of India. The role of SPE was gradually extended, and by 1963 it was authorized to investigate offences under section 97 of the Indian Penal Code, offences under the Prevention of Corruption Act and 16 other central acts. In 1963, the Government of India set up the Central Bureau of Investigation. This new organization's charter included not only the work done by the Delhi Police Establishment, but also additional investigation work relating to breach of central fiscal laws, major frauds in central government departments, public joint stock companies, passport frauds, crimes on high seas and in the air, organized crime committed by professional gangs. It was also given the work of maintaining crime statistics, collecting intelligence relating to certain types of crimes, working as the National Crime Record Bureau or the NCB of the country for the International Police Organization or the Interpol as we commonly know it. Presently, the CBI consists of the following divisions. First, the Anti-Corruption Division. Second, the Economic Offences Division. Third, the Special Crimes Division. Fourth, the Legal Division. Fifth, Coordination Division. Sixth, Administration Division. And Administration Division, Policy and Organization Division. And then Technical Division, Central Forensic Science Laboratories. The legal powers of investigation of CBI are derived from the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act of 1946. The organization can investigate only such offences as are notified by the central government under section 3 of the DPSE Act. The powers, duties, privileges and liabilities of the members of the organization are the same as those of the police officers of the Union Territories and relation to the notified offences. While exercising such powers, members of the CBI and above the rank of sub-inspectors are deemed to be officers in charge of the police station. The central government is authorized to extend the powers and jurisdiction of the members of CBI to any area, including railway areas, for the investigation of offences notified under section 3 of the Delhi Special Police Establishment Act, subject to the consent of the government of the concerned state. Now coming to the role of the prosecutor. Prior to the enactment of the Criminal Procedure Code of 1973, public prosecutors were attached to the police department and they were responsible to the district superintendent of police. However, after the new code of criminal procedure came into force in 1973, the prosecution wing has been totally detached from the police department. The prosecution wing in a state is now headed by officers designated as the Directorate of Prosecution under section 25 capital A of the CRPC. The sessions court, the cases are prosecuted by public prosecutors. The district magistrate prepares a panel of suitable lawyers in the consultation with sessions judges to be appointed as public prosecutors. The state government appoints public prosecutors out of the panel prepared by the district magistrate and the sessions judge. It is important to mention that public prosecutors who prosecute cases in the sessions court do not fall under the jurisdiction and control of the Directorate of Prosecutions. The state government also appoints public prosecutors in the High Court. The appointments are made in consultation with the High Court as per section 24 of the code. The most senior law officer in a state is the Advocate General, who is a constitutional authority. He is appointed by the governor of a state under Article 165 of the Indian Constitution. He has the authority to address any court in the state. The assistant public prosecutor grade 1 and grade 2 are appointed by a state government under section 25 CRPC on the basis of a competitive examination conducted by State Public Service Commission. Public prosecution is an important component of the criminal justice system. Prosecution of an offender is the duty of the executive, which is carried out through the institution of public prosecutor. The Supreme Court of India defined the role and functions of the public prosecutor in the case of Shiv Nandan Paswan versus State of Bihar and others, AIR 1983, Supreme Court 1994 as under. A. The prosecution of an offender is the duty of the executive, which is carried out through the institution of the public prosecutor. B. Withdrawal from prosecution is an executive function of the public prosecutor under section 321 of the CRPC. C. Discretion to withdraw from prosecution is that of the public prosecutor, and that none else than he cannot surrender this discretion to anyone. The fourth point, D, the government may suggest to the public prosecutor to withdraw a case, but it cannot compel him, and ultimately the decision and discretion of the judgment of the public prosecutor would prevail. The fifth point is the public prosecutor may withdraw from prosecution not only on the ground of paucity of evidence, but also on other relevant grounds in order to further the broad ends of public justice, public order and peace. The sixth point, the public prosecutor is an officer of the court and is responsible to it. The prosecutor has a very significant role. To start with, there is a presumption of innocence in favor of the accused. On the basis of the facts proved by oral documentary and forensic evidences, the public prosecutor tries to substantiate the charges against the accused and drives home the guilt against him. If there is a statutory law regarding presumption against the accused, the public prosecutor draws the court's attention towards that and meshes it with other evidence on record. Throughout the trial, he has the burden to prove the guilt of the person, and the standard is quite high. In India, as it has been beyond the reasonable doubt, it has to prove the circumstances and then he has to draw the inferences and convince the court that the arraigned accused alone is guilty of the offence that he has been charged with. Now coming to the fourth wing of the criminal justice administration, the judiciary. The role of a judge or the court in India starts from the stage of taking cognizance of the criminal case under section 190 of the CRPC, followed by making over of the case under section 192 of the CRPC, and the appropriate court having jurisdiction to try the case, or to the Court of Sessions under section 209 CRPC. This is followed by the issue of process under section 204 either by summons or warrant as the case may be. Once all the actors of the criminal justice administration, that is the accused represented by the defense counsel, the prosecutor representing the state as well as the victim and the judge come face to face, the trial unfolds. At this stage, the court frames the charge if the evidence submitted to it and from the opening statements and of the two sides, it comes to the conclusion that the evidence is sufficient to start the trial. Conversely, discharges the accused person if the evidence is not sufficient. During the whole process of trial, the court's duty is finding of the facts that are relevant from the evidence presented by the prosecutor and the evidence defense, and come to the conclusion of the guilt by making the balance sheet of the aggravating and mitigating factors. Once the judgment is reached, and in case it is a guilty verdict, the court proceeds to pronounce the sentence, applying its discretion based again on the aggravating and mitigating factors. The antecedents and probability of reform of the offenders. Let us now discuss about the structure of the judiciary. The judiciary has the Supreme Court at the apex having threefold jurisdiction, namely original, appellate and advisory. Supreme Court and High Courts have only appellate criminal jurisdiction. Below the Supreme Court are the high Courts at the state level, followed by subordinate courts in the districts. The Courts of Sessions exercise both original and appellate jurisdiction. Major offences like murder, dacoity, robbery, rape, etc. cannot be tried in the court below the Court of Sessions. Supreme Court covers constitutional, civil and criminal cases. In criminal matters, an appeal lies to the Supreme Court from any judgment or order of the High Court if the latter has on appeal reversed an order of acquittal and sentenced the accused to death or imprisonment for life, or for a period of not less than 10 years, or has withdrawn for trial before itself any case and has in such trial sentenced the accused person to death, certified that the case is fit for appeal. In any case, the Supreme Court under Article 136 of the Constitution can grant special leave to appeal from any judgment, decree, determination, sentence or order in any matter passed or made by any court or tribunal in the territory of India. The consultative jurisdiction of the Supreme Court in respect of matters which are referred for its opinion and advice by the President of India under Article 143 of the Constitution. The High Court exercises appellate jurisdiction in criminal cases under section 374 of the CRPC, that is appeal from an order of conviction, and section 378, that is appeal from the order of an acquittal. Apart from the High Court also have inherent jurisdiction under section 482 to give effect to an order under the code, to prevent abuse of process of court and to otherwise secure the ends of justice. The jurisdiction of the trial courts are determined on the basis of the sentencing jurisdiction of the courts in accordance to section 28 and 29 of the Criminal Procedure Code. Let us now discuss about the last and final wing, that is the correctional or prison system. The court determines the guilt of the accused and pronounces the appropriate sentences. In case the court comes to the conclusion, owing to the facts and circumstances of the case as well as the convict, that it is better for rehabilitation prospect of the person to release him on probation under the Probation of Offenders Act 1958, read with section 360 of the CRPC, then the court may release the convict under probation. However, in case a sentence of imprisonment is pronounced, then the final wing of the criminal justice system is activated, that is the correctional wing through the prison system. The sentence of imprisonment in India is not punitive, Rather, it is for the using the period of incarceration for the reformation and rehabilitation of the prisoner. This is achieved through therapeutic treatment of education, labor, vocational training and yoga and meditation, so that the prisoner is reformed internally, not to choose the path of crime once he goes out of the prison. The prison and its administration is a state subject, as it is covered under item 4 under list 2 of the schedule 7 of Constitution of India. Prison establishments in different states or union territories comprise several tiers of jails. The most common and standard jail institutions which are in existence in the states and union territories are better known as central jails, district jails and sub jails. The other types of jail establishments are women jails, Brostel schools, open jails and special jails. District jails serve as the main prisons in some of the states and union territories. States which have considerable number of district jails are Uttar Pradesh, which has 56, followed by Madhya Pradesh, which has 33, Bihar 31, Rajasthan 25, Maharashtra 27, Assam 22, Karnataka 19, Jharkhand 17, Haryana 16, West Bengal 12, according to the prison statistics taken in 2014. 9 states have reported comparatively higher number of sub-jails, revealing a well organized prison setup even at lower formation. These states are Maharashtra, which has 100, Andhra Pradesh 99, Tamil Nadu 96, Madhya Pradesh 78, Odisha 73, Karnataka 70, Rajasthan 60 and West Bengal and Telangana 33 each. Women jails are exclusively for women prisoners, which exist only in 13 states and union territories. Tamil Nadu and Kerala have 3 women jails each, and Rajasthan and West Bengal have 2 women jails each, and Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Odisha, Punjab, Telangana, Uttar Pradesh and Delhi have 1 women jail each. Special jail means any prison provided for the confinement of a particular class or particular classes of prisoners, which are broadly as follows. Number 1, prisoners who have committed serious violations of prison discipline. Number 2, prisoners showing tendencies towards violence and aggression. Number 3, difficult discipline cases of habitual offenders. Number 4, difficult discipline cases from a group of professional or organized criminals. The custodial staffs in the prison is responsible for the maintenance of discipline and compliance of the prison rules. At the very top is the Inspector General of Police and the deputies. The custodial staffs which remain present inside the prison premises is headed by the Superintendent of Prisons, jailer and then the warder. The non-custodial staffs in the prison who are responsible for the well-being of the inmates of the prison include the medical staffs and the treatment staffs, who ensure that the inmates are reformed and rehabilitated, and when they fall sick they are taken care of during their stay in the prison. Therefore, to summarize the discussion, the functioning of the criminal justice system is the true reflection of the peace and order that the members of the state are enjoying. The Indian criminal justice system, although of a common law origin, but in its structure and functioning, both it has now evolved into a hybridized system. It has inculcated many inquisitorial elements where the judges have the power of inquiry, and through that they are actually participating in the truth finding process rather than being mere fact finders. The archaic laws like the Police Act of 1861 still govern the structure and functioning of the police, and so is the Prison Act of 1894 in the case of prisons, which affects the efficiency dimension of the criminal justice system. In every state, the criminal justice system is expected to provide the maximum sense of security to the people at large, tackling crimes and criminals effectively, quickly and legally. More specifically, the aim is to reduce the level of crime in society by ensuring maximum detection of reported crimes, apprehension of the accused, conviction of the accused person without delay, awarding appropriate punishments to the convicted to meet the ends of justice, and their proper treatment in the prison to prevent recidivism. Clearly defined hierarchy and roles of different actors of the various wings of the criminal justice system is very significant, and a proper coordination between all the wings of the criminal justice system is the key to an efficient system. Thank you.